Hello there and welcome back to another review. So I was thinking, really do need to get some more Jet Li movies on my channel. There's loads I want to review, loads that I remember from back in the day, classics I want to review, My Father the Hero, New Legend of Shaolin, Bodyguard from Beijing. There's loads of Jet Li's to get through, Black Mask, Dr. Wei, so many. But today I thought we'll get round to the Shaolin temples, but today I thought we'd have a look at Born to Defend. Now, I've always known this movie is Born to Defend, which is, I think, makes more sense than Born to Defense. I think Born to Defend just makes sense, and that's how I sort of always knew this film. This was a film that I had on VHS back in the day. I think it was Hong Kong Classics that released it from on that label, and it was actually one of the first Jet Li films I think I picked up. I think it was definitely one of the first Jet Li films that I bought, because when I was in London shopping, whether HMV, or my parents would take me up there, or I was looking in Virgin Megastore, places like that, Born to Defend would always be up there. It would be in the sort of the Jet Li section. It would be there. So I think it was very much one of the first ones that I picked up. Now, this was Jet Li's directorial debut, and to my knowledge, this is the only film he has directed up to this point. I know he's produced films and things like that, but I think, as far as I know, this is the only film that he has actually directed. And a lot of people are not fans of this movie, largely due to the simple plot, how the Americans are sort of portrayed, and some of the fight choreography here, which, by the way, was done by Soi Su Ming, if you recall, was in The Buddhist Fist. A little bit of trivia. Do try and slip in a bit of trivia as and when I can. But I've reviewed previously The Buddhist Fist. Now, yes, the film is a tad xenophobic. It hasn't really aged that well, and you know, because all the Americans are sort of portrayed as womanizing drunken bullies who only cause trouble, and the film is it is rough around the edges. I mean, and that's sort of being as kind to it as possible. It is quite rough around the edges, and this is not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination, but is it a good Jet Li movie? Well, first thing you have to take into account is this was like Jet Li's third or fourth movie in his career at this point, which I think it was made around the same time as Martial Arts of Shaolin, the third Shaolin Temple movie. And up to this point, I think he had only largely done the Shaolin Temple movies under his belt. So you have to take into account Jet Li. He was not a film guy, you know, he was a martial artist and, you know, Wushu champion. So it's not like he studied film or had a number of movies in his back catalogue at this point to gain experience from. So, you know, like Jackie Chan was working as stuntman, he was working as, you know, extras and all these kind of things, and taking bit parts and learning the trade sort of as he goes along. Jet Li, very much, like I mentioned, you know, he was just martial arts. He was just, you know, like a Wushu champion. His background wasn't in film and things like that. So, you know, when this is Jet Li directing this, you have to take that into account. Some people have said this film was made in 1986, and some have said 1988. But what you have to take into account with this movie, this was Jet trying to make his mark. I think that was the intention here. I don't want to be just, you know, I don't want to just be known for the Shaolin Temple movies. I think this was very much, which as I mentioned, I will get round to reviewing. You know, I don't just want to do traditional kung fu movies. So not only did it make the film a bit more modern, but the focus is actually more on boxing and barroom brawls and things like that. So, you know, to take that kind of leap from sort of you know, what traditional Shaolin Temple kind of movies, and say, do you know what? Not only am I going to do a bit more of a modern type of film, I'm going to do a film where it is quite brutal, and it's largely going to be type of almost boxing choreography that we get here. A bit more modern, as I say, and it's, like I say, barroom brawls going on here. In that sense, the film is rather an odd commodity. As to go hard in this movie, you could say, like I say, it's rough around the edges, and it's actually quite dark and brutal in its nature and violence, and especially the antagonists who are just causing trouble, well, just because. And I can understand fully why if you don't like this movie, definitely does leave a bit of a bad taste in just the way the Americans are sort of portrayed in this movie. It's like they're just sort of animals in this movie, you know, and as I say, it does border on a bit xenophobic and things like that. Now, watching this for the first time, I will be honest, I absolutely loved it. It blew me away. You have to remember the time I was, you know, I mentioned about, 10 or 11 years old around that time, but I absolutely loved it because, you know, Jet in this film, what I loved about it, he's not untouchable. He gets hit, he bleeds, he takes falls, and he's got nice fluid movement in this movie. Very little, if no, wire work as well. And you really, I think, in this movie get to see, I think, why Born to Defense or Defend should not be overlooked. I know, like I keep saying, but I know this film doesn't have its fans. I know there's a lot of people that don't like this movie, but I think I think with this movie you get to see Jet the fighter. You get to see Jet the brawler. You get to see a lot more than what you see in many of his other movies. Yes, the bad guys are over the top. Yes, their motives are next to nothing. The lighting isn't great. But all that aside, it's not a bad movie. It's one of them movies that you really should give another go if you didn't like it the first time, or if it's a movie do I remember Born to Defense or Born to Defend? Go and check it out again, because I remember watching it and watching it again recently. I still think the fighting, it's just not what people were expecting. It's not what people necessarily wanted at the time. Jet Li is mostly known for his wire work and his flamboyant moves and his, obviously his charisma and things like that. But I think Born to Defend, more than any other movie, there's a handful, but I think Born to Defend especially, you do get to see Jet the fighter here. Like I say, he's not Wong Fei Hung in this. He's not completely, he's not untouchable. He's not one of these people that's always going to come out on top. Like I mentioned, he gets beat up quite severely in this movie. But the fights, when I say the film is rough around the edges, the fights are so sort of, there's obviously a lot of contact happening. There's a lot of, like I said, a lot of blood and sweat happening in the whole film. The whole film, very much, when they are fighting in the ring, in like the bar and things like that, it really does. It feels dirty, and it feels sort of seedy as well. But there's something about this movie what I think it's sometimes overlooked. I think it's one of the movies that you should really give a second chance to. I don't think it's a bad movie. I mean, many go on about, Fist of Legend, but just for the record, I mean, Fong Se-yuk and Black Mask and Dr. Wei probably will be my 3 favourite Jet Li's, but anyway, that's always changing. Like I mentioned, it's like, if you said, what's your favourite Sammo? What's your favourite Jackie Chan? I could tell you, but you ask me again tomorrow, it'd be something else. But no, Born to Defend is something I'd say I always remember this movie. So the movie opens with Jet laying waste to some Japanese tank and artillery. And the film does have a great opening sequence, very Eastern Condors in its nature, with some amazing stunt work. Some of the guys are taking with some of the explosions, flipping into trees, getting blown apart. And it's really well directed. I think some credit should be given there in terms of the scope. So after the war, Jet and his brothers return home right away, and there is trouble already as the townfolk are applauding the American soldiers and not them. Jet is looking for his friend Shang, who is like his old lieutenant, and of course he mistakenly goes to this prostitute, first by mistake. He meets Shang and he says his daughter is dead. Shang is telling him that his daughter is dead. So for no reason whatsoever, the Americans drive like lunatics through the street. Jet gets run over in a stunt where you can clearly see it's him doing it. And that's another thing as well. I mean, I know Jet, has used he has used doubles before, but in this film, for the most part, he's doing all of it himself. He really is doing most of the falls, and like I say here with the car, you can tell it is him. All the townspeople will have an issue with them after they try to bribe them for what happened. He begins to fight the captain, who is like about 7 foot, and he's like, he's got his sunglasses on, and this coach is like, so tough guy, we will meet again. And he does like this really hammy voice. Anytime a villain wears shades and just in the background doesn't say much, he's going to be the bad dude. It's guaranteed. Then Jet and his friends go for a drink and at the local bar, and guess what? It's full of the Navy guys. And of course, there's a boxing ring. So I wonder what's going to happen next. I wonder, they don't like them. There's a boxing ring. They've gone for a drink and they've just turned up. I wonder what's going to happen. You will recognise Paulo Tocha, I think is how you say his name, or Tocha. Here is Bailey, who I'm sure many of you will remember from the Van Damme movie Bloodsport. So within 1 minute of being there, one of Jet's friends is getting beat up after an altercation involving a condom. So this film, as I say, when I say it's seedy, it is a little bit seedy. So no sooner they walked in, there's a condom involved, one of them gets started on. Jet gets challenged by Bailey to last 3 minutes in the ring. Jet starts beating him with his legs and elbows and doesn't realise that it's not allowed. And like I say, Jet's fluidity and speed is second to none here, and it's great that Jet wanted to do a movie that was very down and dirty and gritty, like with this grounded choreography. Jet beats the crap out of the guy, sending him flying out the ring. Him and his friends are all happy after the fight, as like Jet has won. Shang is pulling a rickshaw for a living and needs to get his spokes fixed. Whilst Jet has gone to get them, Bailey and this prostitute now get a ride from him, and he starts kicking Shang. And some of the scenes in this, when I say it's it's a bit horrible to watch. Some of the scenes are a bit uncomfortable, as there is no need for the antagonist to act like this. They've just made them, like I say, extremely xenophobic in this movie, which I know I can understand why a lot of people don't like it. So Shang drops the rickshaw and Bailey beats him up too and puts him in hospital. Jet now takes over pulling the rickshaw. One of his first customers is a pregnant lady who's going into labour, and whilst doing this, the sailors, the Navy guys, come along in this jeep and are like, right, let's hassle him again. I think that the quote they use is, let's get his ass. So they smash up his rickshaw. So, of course, now to earn money, Jet becomes the sparring partner for the US fighters, as Sam the barman offered him the job and he isn't allowed to fight back. So Jet's like, I need money, I'll be the sparring partner for the Americans. So, of course, it is Bailey. If you don't know, that's the guy from Bloodsport. As I say, is it Tocha? Or how you say his name? You know the guy. As soon as you see him, if you've seen Bloodsport, you'll know the guy I mean. So it's Bailey wants to be his sparring partner and beats the crap out of him right away. Jet wants to quit, but if he does, they will rough him up. Right, they will rough Sam the barman up. I love this because Jet goes into pure animal mode here, right? He goes absolutely crazy. I mean, this guy, he's growling, he's snarling, saying things like, come on, hit me again. And this is about as far as you can get from the Wong Fei Hung character. This is about as far as you could get. And when I say you get to see Jet the fighter, I mean it in this film. There's a real... this is almost street fighting, boxing, that kind of thing. There's no rules, there's no limits. And like I say, Jet in this movie is a complete animal. He's like a thing possessed when he's fighting. And it was a different side to Jet. If you've only seen sort of the Wong Fei Hungs, sort of the Once Upon a Time China's or Fist of Legends, check out Born to Defense, because you really do see a different side to Jet Li. And what is so interesting, as I mentioned, is that he decided to do this so early on in his career. Not only did he, like I say, decide to do this, he wanted to direct this as well. So he obviously had a lot of faith and interest in the project. Bailey starts to get freaked out, seeing how crazy he is, and having you have to have the captain still with his shades on at the back, still looking mean and moody, this time with a cigar on to emphasise he's the moody one, he's the main dude. Now the prostitute pays Jet a visit, saying it was all a setup. The captain goes to fight Jet and he's like, I plan on kicking your ass. So yeah, the guy's about 7 foot, and when you see Jet in these barroom brawls and the way it's shot, it almost looks like they're really fighting, as it really is intense and it's really full on. Like I mentioned, a lot of it is full contact, and the way, as I say, the way it's shot, it really does work. Nothing laid back about this movie at all. This is very different, very, very different, and I use that term as much as broad as possible in terms of like very different to the Shaolin Temple movies. The bar gets a severe water leak with thunder and lightning outside, just to add to the whole intenseness of the scene. You can tell too a lot of it, like I mentioned, when they do get hit, they're getting hit. They're really, really getting hit. And like I said, when I watched this when I was younger and I saw this film, I loved it. I thought it was the best Jet Li film I'd ever seen. I'd only seen maybe around, I don't know, 8 or so at that point. There's, when you watch films when you're younger and films stick with you, as I mentioned, Dr. Wei, Black Mask, Fong Sei-yuk. I know everybody rates Fist of Legend as his best film, but I think I just love Fist of Legend, but I think it's sometimes a tiny bit overrated. But Black Mask, I think, is underrated. But when I watched this when I was younger, though, I loved it. Looking at it now, yes, it is rough, it's scrappy, it's a dirty film, but you really do get very intense Jet Li fight scenes here, and that is, and that is why I watch a Jet Li movie, for the action. And Born to Defend does deliver on that. It's just a shame the bad guys have no motive, and they're portrayed as, they're portrayed in the manner in which they are. So Jet gets thrown out the bar window and actually gets owned, and just when you think he's done, he marches back in and drops the captain into a table. Then the guy guy drags Jet out of the ring, and it's actually quite a long fight scene we get here, and I actually like the choreography in this movie. Na rescues Jet, a bar brawl sort of happens. Jet is delirious when she gets him home, and he keeps speaking of the rickshaw because obviously his Lieutenant Shang is the person he wants to help. Shang wants nothing to do with Na, who helped pay his medical bill. He slaps her, and if you haven't guessed it already, she is Shang's daughter, and he's the one who he said to Jet she was dead. And he's ashamed of her because she's like a prostitute. Shang kicks Jet out as he's sort of defending her. They come up with a plan to sort of win Shang over. Jet saying he's fallen in love with a hooker, and Shang being all, well, she deserves forgiveness. And the hooker in question actually being Na. They aren't in love, of course. They just want to see, he would forgive somebody else. Why won't he forgive his own daughter? So they all make amends, all is lovely, and this is where you can probably... Na goes to get some wine, and guess what? The US soldiers turn up, and they take her, and well, we knew that was going to happen. Where have they taken her to? Well, the warehouse district. Of course, we probably knew that was going to happen. If, any Kung Fu martial arts film, it's either going to be a warehouse construction site. They take it, like for the ending, they take her to the warehouse district. Bailey starts assaulting Na. Jet fights the captain. Just so we know, these sailors are super scum and the devil spawned. They throw Na and Shang off like this bridge, and they land on gravel, and it kills them both, which to me was overkill. Even watching this back in the day, I thought that was a bit like in Kickboxer when it's you sort of let upon the Tong Post with like the girl in Kickboxer was raped, which I think was a bit overkill. Like Van Damme in Kickboxer already had enough motive. Jet in this already had enough motive. You didn't need like his lieutenant and like this girl, like his daughter. You didn't need them getting killed as well. I thought that was a bit too much to have Na and Shane killed off. Like I say, you would get the Americans the badness, but as I say, I think there's no rhyme or reason for the way they're antagonized. I can fully understand why sort of a lot of US audiences would have a problem with this movie, because like I mentioned, it's so there's no rhyme or reason for them acting the way they do. With all that's happened so far, as I say, they didn't need to die. Shang has shrapnel inside of him, daughter a prostitute. That's what I'm saying. At the start, we learned Shang has shrapnel inside him, right? His daughter's a prostitute. He gets put in hostel, and then he gets murdered. He hasn't had a lot of luck, Shang, in this movie. The captain is like, what the hell have you done? The authorities turn up and take them and put Jet away, where they start beating up Jet in his cell for causing trouble, and the Americans are released. Jet manages to escape via the aid of a wet t-shirt, and for some reason the US guys are at the warehouse where Jet sort of ambushes them in some new clothes, I might add. I'm not sure if there was a scene cut there, but he's got some new threads. Has some fancy dungarees on. He starts with like a Molotov cocktail and then starts taking them out stealth style. And how does he get payback on Bailey? Well, he just burns him alive, of course. He just say Wong Fei Hung. This is not Wong Fei Hung. So I say, just burns this guy alive. Don't you just love a good light-hearted Jet Li movie? Like I mentioned, as rough as the film is and plot is almost non-existent, the end fight I personally feel is very underrated in terms of showdown from like sort of Jet's back catalogue. I think it's a great end fight. I really do. When he is taking on the captain, there is flips, falls, punches, Jet using a chain to good effect, spanners, hammers. It really is a brutal showdown. I think it's a great final fight. We get wheelbarrows involved. It ends with Jet going at the captain with an axe even, sort of sparing him and walking off at the last minute. But I still think it's a movie worth checking out, despite how uncomfortable it is and sort of, as I say, it is a bit cringeworthy in places. Not, and there are moments where it's like, okay, why are the baddies? They're just who would act like that? It's the only film Jet directed, and he chose to direct a barroom brawl type of movie, which is interesting in itself. Plot is by the numbers. Yes, the villains are just causing trouble for no reason, but this was only like Jet's third or fourth movie up to this point, so I don't think you can be too hard on it, and especially from a guy, like I mentioned, who's got no sort of movie sort of training and wasn't educated that way. I think it's a more than substantial effort, and I think you can't be too hard on it before he hit the big time with Once Upon a Time in China. But check it out for a rough and ready Jet Li movie. Doesn't hold up all that well now, watching it again recently, but there is some great choreography in this thanks to Soi Su Ming, and I love films where we get to see Jet the fighter rather than loads of wire work all the time, and Born to Defend really shows that off amazingly well. So thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you again soon.
concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.